Okay, perfect. So the date today is April 21st, 2021, and the interviewer is Kathy Shu, she, her, hers. And the interviewee is Amanda Fuenzalida, she, her, hers. And do you consent to audio and video recording that will eventually be available, publicly available on a website?
Yes.
Perfect, thank you. And so the first question is, what role has imagination and or fantasy played in your life? How has it been formative for you?
So always as a little kid, I've always kind of like been more of an artsy person. I've been drawing for as long as I can remember, and that has always like influenced the way that I've like created things and kind of always seen like the world around me. And I feel like very early on, I was also really into fantasy books. Like I can vividly remember like all the books I used to read as a child and kind of the ways that like I would imagine like how life would be if we had magic or if we had superpowers or if we were the children of gods. Um, and I feel like that always like played a part into the creativity that I found in my day to day. And like now that I've maybe like matured out of some of those things, like I feel like I can still go back and connect with them the same ways. Um, I like kind of like finding all the little things even now. And it's kind of pushed me to go out of the box and even kind of maybe going into a major, which is a lot more like in a box. Like I still find all the ways to connect with that like side of myself.
Yeah, and what are the types of like literature that you used to read or like the like small things that like you find wonder in? Basically, like can you like give some like examples or like stories or something?
So we have to be basic for a moment. Like obviously we have your Harry Potter, your Percy Jackson. Those are classics. But I feel like I remember some of the other ones, like The Familiars. I remember that like blew up very big, and they had come out with a sequel, and I don't know if I ever read it, but some part of me still wants to like go back and read it. Where it was like there's like wizards and like magic and like their pets were like like just as important to them. I'm trying to think of some like other ones. I feel like I used to love as like I got older, I got into shadow hunters really like strongly, and I loved like the entire book series for that and like using the runes and kind of like that expression of art on the skin to like unlock like your inner power. Um, like I was obsessed with like all those little things, and like I feel like they've kind of like shaped the way that I kind of see the world because I always want to like think a little bit more out there than what's just like plain in the eye.
Yeah, and I'm wondering if there are like specific like I don't know, worlds or like powers or like things that like really appeal to you.
I feel like I've always really liked kind of in a way like elemental things. Like I feel like in a way I've also really connected with like the zodiac signs a lot and like those like elements and like I really kind of like to see the way that like zodiac signs connect to like physical elements. Um and like those like little things I love like the idea of like being able to like shape what's like physical in the world into kind of like the magic that we want to see. Um yeah, I would say definitely like those like styles. And then like I just remember I have like a Harry Potter wand and I always used to wave it around, pretend I could cast my own spells.
I love that. Yeah. You said like the magic that we want to see. And I'm curious to hear more about like basically like if Amanda were to build her own world, like what is the type of like magic that you want to see? Like what would exist in this world?
Um, it's like inner means like which world do I choose? Because I used to be obsessed with like so many. Like I used to love like the story of the fairies. I also like fell in love with like the wizarding world as well. And like just like I would feel like I would want to make a world that would be like a little bit of everything. Like I like universes that are very inclusive. And like but I like portraying them in a way like in a good light as possible. So like I like the worlds where there is like cohesiveness between all like the creatures or like elementals or all like the people in that society. I would think I would want like a universe that had um where like maybe like each entity represented like a different aspect of life, and that is kind of like how they would like blend together. So like if you had like let's say if you had a world that partially had like vampires and like they're like the creatures of the night, well it's like they're like in charge of like the protection that goes like in the darkness. And then you have like the pixies or like the fairies, and I just think of them also with like the connection to like fireflies, so they would like connect with like all the bugs to kind of like protect all the nature. And like I feel like that would come into term with like dryads, or like I'm trying to think what's like the other word, like I forgot like the word, but like maybe in a way you could think of it like um deities, like a nature deity, and they protect nature and kind of like it all just coming together. And then you could have like witches, and they lived among us, and so they were in charge of kind of like using the power that they were given and kind of like spreading it to maintain like that unity, maintain that peace between like all the all the people.
Yeah, I love that. I'm curious as to like where you would fit it in this world. Like, what do you imagine yourself being like in this world? One of the questions I've been asking people is like, if given no real world restrictions, what would be the ultimate self or elements of it that you would imagine for yourself?
I feel like I would want to be like a mixture of two. Like, I feel like I would want to definitely be like part witch, because like I feel like the part of me that like loves to learn, loves to study, would be like, yes, I want to be a witch and like learn all the spells and like learn how to like do my part. And then like another part of me would like to see like if I was like maybe like combined with like a fairy and like having like those like really nice like delicate wings, and kind of like having that ability to be like a middle ground between people, because it's like if every person has their position, and then like being able to be like a combination of the two, like I feel like I would have the ability to connect more, with like all the little like universes, like or all the little like communities in my world. um and I can just see myself like bouncing from flower to flower, like sprinkling little fairy dust.
I love that. Yeah. I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit more about like you mentioned like how like different entities would have different roles. And you also mentioned like bouncing from community to community. I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit more about like how the different entities or like how you would like relate and connect with like other be like working together with like other entities and like I don't know if there's like a general goal that you're trying to like that you're all trying to work towards kind of thing.
I feel like I would also want a universe that's like it's like mixed with humans, but it's like hidden at the same time. So it's like you can add that element of like always like mystery throughout everything. And so like I feel like I would want like the universe that they each have their roles, and it's obviously very different from like human life. Like they don't need to worry about like kind of like money or like the job in a way. It's more like kind of like each group in a way providing for each other, but they're still kind of like self-sufficient in a way. And then like being able to like connect in a way with like the human world at like a level of understanding. Like I want everything to be like connected. um and I feel like if I'm thinking like it could be like each one is like maybe like a provider of something. So like you could have the like if you're having like the nature deities with like the fairies, then they would be kind of like providing the agriculture aspect of like the world. And like I always think of like I think it's like I don't remember the exact phrase, but like I'm thinking of like you give back what you take. And so it's like you don't take any more than you need. And so like if like the other people in the universe, like let's say the witches needed herbs for like to cast a spell or to like make a potion, then they would only take the amount that they would need. And like kind of like in return their magic or their spells could help influence like another aspect of society. So kind of like creating that like cycle of like exchange in a way, and then like adding a level of like spontaneity by having it be slightly connected to the human world, I would say.
Oh, yeah. I love that. I love that imagery. Yeah, I'm wondering if you could talk a little bit, like describe a little bit more about like what you would look like in your form. What you imagine yourself looking like appearance wise. Yeah, we can start there and then move on to the next question. Yeah.
Um, for me, I think every time I think of myself and I'm imagining myself, it's like the conflict is like, do I want short hair? Do I want long hair? Because I'm like always like between the two. Um, I say maybe a middle ground. I would imagine myself with like middle length hair, and I would want it to like, I guess like I really like the color I have now, but I would imagine like streaks of color kind of being like blended throughout. And like I feel like I would want a flower crown. Like I don't need a tiara, I just want a flower crown. Um, and like could like sparkle like fairy dust. Um, and I feel like in a way I would want like I would imagine myself like I almost feel like maybe like a rosier skin tone, and then like being like it's not like the tattoos that are like always marked, but it's like almost like the ones that look like you're born with, like on my arms. And then those would like be like a slightly different color. I would imagine like they would shimmer slightly. And I feel like I could be like the similar thing like on my legs. Um, and I feel like I think of like the ability of being able to both be like regular size and like smaller. Um, and then I think of like wings that could appear and not appear, but they would be like crystalline. Like they almost have that like transparent, like looking through like crystal glass feel to them, but they would be translucent, and then like as like the light, depending on the light it hit them, they would change color. Um, kind of making that like I'm thinking of like mosaic glass kind of feel. Um, and then I'm trying like clothing wise, like I feel like I'd be the kind of girl who would want a skirt but want like the leggings underneath or something like that. So it's like I can be girly, but it's like I can kick butt too if you need me to.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I'm also wondering like I feel like your like world has a very like kind of like seems like it has like a very like collaborative effort amongst like everyone. And I'm curious if you can talk a little bit about like where you think like what limits in our reality or like what aspects of our reality have like driven you to create this like imagination, like this type of a world, this imagined version of yourself.
um, I feel like recently I've just been seeing like little tidbits and like recreations of like characters, and like I've got a lot of like art accounts, and that's like I've been seeing a lot of like this like magic element without it and like within it. And so like I feel like it's like kind of like made me like deep down kind of like start thinking of like all these little like creatures, and like I would want to see them like live together, like kind of like bringing in that like diversity feel into it. Um, I feel like I'm also a really like social person for the most part. And so like I like that ability of like having so many like different people come together to connect in the same ways. Like especially like coming to college, that's kind of like how it is in a way. And so I feel like I would just like I'm trying to think of like a more mature but like magical like feel to what like I maybe see, or like the way, and I think of it more like in terms of like connecting with people. Like that's what I like to do. So
Yeah, and are there like any aspects that you think motivate you to like want like for example wings that like I'm wondering about not just like the aesthetics of your appearance but also like what like functions your appearance like your choices in appearance might have and what like why you chose those.
Um, I would say I like the idea of like the tattoos because I will never get a tattoo. um, but I like kind of like the idea of it, and like in a way, I feel like with magic they could be free form and like changing. And it's like two reasons why I don't want to get a tattoo. One, parents value them too much, and two, because I feel like I'm can't commit to a design long enough to be like want to endlessly like I'd always want to like change it around. Like I have a fake tattoo on right now, and I'm like waiting for it to come off so I can maybe buy another one to stick on. And so like I feel like maybe that aspect's where that come from. I like I feel like maybe like I envision like my character as things I would want to do in reality, but like don't always like push myself to. And so I would be like in a free universe, like I would go crazy because like you have magic to kind of like change it at your will. Um, and like wings because like I like that idea of flying, but I also come from like a perspective of that like I needed to like distance myself away. And like I love to explore. And I feel like I would want the wings to like be like limitless in that aspect, like having a like breaking a boundary that we normally can't break. Um, and so like I feel like that's what like I want to envision myself, like things that truly would represent another side of me that I can't see in my physical sense.
Yeah, and this is pretty similar to like a question I asked earlier, but I want to like find out more. Basically like yeah, like I'm wondering what are like the boundaries that you want to be able to break in like the grand scheme of like your world and also like in reaction to like our world.
I feel like I want to break boundaries because, or like in a way that allows people to open up themselves more. Um, like I feel like sometimes like in the reality we live with, we live very like enclosed mindsets. We live in very like kind of like we only think we can do this much and we don't always open up ourselves to the other possibilities, and kind of like it feel like it also maybe comes at a point of like retribution. You're afraid of like what you're going to look like, what's it going to seem like. um and so sometimes that like keeps you in from maybe trying things or like discovering things that maybe you would want to do. And so like I feel like with like the universe that I would want to create, I would want it to be kind of so open that there can't exactly be a level of judgment for what you might do because it's already there. Um, like trying to think of like how to better expand on it. Um, I feel like I would want a universe that kind of focused a little bit on love and kind of like having that ability to truly love whoever you would want. And I feel like that's at the same time why I want this like openness, like this like such like cohesiveness, because like I want a level of like connection between like the universe that's like deeper than kind of what meets the eye.
Yeah, yeah. And I'm wondering in relation to that, like I have multiple questions here. But we can start off with like what do you think that you mentioned like a lot about like, you know, reading all these fantasy books and like maybe you can talk about like what power and potential you think there is in the imagination and fantasy, given that like you are someone who's imagining but also consuming other people's imagination.
I feel like reading the fantasy books is like a beginning because you just like want to put yourself in their shoes so like badly. And I feel like that's why franchises that startup companies surrounded around these like fantasy like are so booming because so many people like envision themselves in their shoes and it's like an escape. um and so I feel like when I'm thinking of like my own imagination, like I don't always think about it in the perspective that I have to create something completely new, but that I can take aspects of what I've like seen and learned and make something just original to myself, because it's like what's true to myself won't be true for anybody else, even if it's something that already might exist.
Yeah, and I'm curious about like thinking about more of this like, like true self, true love. Like I've noticed that like you like talk a lot about like this like kind of true genuine idea of something, and I'm wondering what it might be for you.
I feel like I've always been the kind of person who's kind of dreamed of like finding the true love. Um, it kind of comes into term where like sometimes I feel that the person I'm least open to might be a person that I'm in a relationship with. And I kind of like I have like that feeling that like when I meet the right person, like my inhibitions will kind of fade away in the moment. So I kind of feel like that's maybe where like my sense of like ingenuity comes from, because it's like I want to believe so strongly in that feeling of like connection that I like want to dream of it in like another universe too. Like I feel like I would want to create a universe where soulmates exist.
And would that just be like romantic like relationships or just like, like in general?
I feel like they wouldn't be tied down to be with that person, but just like knows that at least there is someone compatible out there for them, whether that be platonic or whether that could end up being like romantic.
Okay, cool. Yeah, and thinking more about like love, I'm also curious about like how you enjoy loving and being loved. So we can start off with like the first question being, how do you like to be loved by others? And like, what do you especially appreciate from others?
So I've recently taken like the love languages um test, and like it just kind of like validated what I already knew. I feel like in many ways, like my way of it's more that I do it and less that I receive it back, but I'm very like centered around gifts, and not even like I'm talking about like valuable things. I just like I love the action of giving something to someone, especially something that can be meaningful. And it always doesn't have to be fully tangible. Like sometimes it's like it can be a thing that was planned. Um, it doesn't necessarily always have to be the physical gift. Like I love kind of like if someone's like meaningful to me, I love going out of my way for them. And like I would just hope that someone would maybe view me in the same light to do the same back. And I feel like that also connects with like I really appreciate physical touch. Like I feel like I connect with people the most through physical touch. I'm a very big hugger. um, and I feel like I also value someone who like it's like just like the little things that just like, and it doesn't always have to tie down to intimacy. It's just more about like establishing that connection, like hey, I'm here, um and I'm here for you, that kind of like mindset.
Yeah, and I mean, I do think that like the way that you like to love is very interconnected with the way that you like to be loved. I noticed that like you responded with like the ways that you like to love. So I'm wondering if, and it could be just that your answer is the same for both, but are there like any ways that you especially enjoy receiving from others?
I think like I kind of sometimes like it to be a surprise, because that means that at like through at some point that person took the time to know me. um I feel like it is in a way like a reflection of like how I give. Um, but like I definitely it's like I like someone who will take the time to remember the little things.
Well, yeah. And what are ways that like you enjoy loving yourself or taking care of yourself?
Um, well, I not recently because it's been a couple years, but I am a very active listener of the K-pop world. And that is my form of self-care. for most days. Like I mostly listen to BTS, but I listen to everybody. But like I love kind of like listening to music that makes me feel inspired and that makes me feel like empowered at times. And like for me, like my best form of self-love is just giving myself a little bit of happiness every day. Whether that be interacting with something from like the K-pop universe, but also like in like making sure that I am not trying to like burn myself out in a day. I also like bullet journal. And so that's like a very big form of like self-care for me because like it allows me like an artistic outlet, but it also allows me a way to be like organized with myself. And I feel like ever since I started doing that, it truly like has changed my perspective of like self-care and like the ways that I can like pay attention to myself too. Um, and yeah, like other self-care days, I'll go get my nails done or like maybe I'll do a face mask that day, but like that's what I think of. Um, there's things that I couldn't really do in high school. I kind of take advantage to do now.
Perfect. Yeah. I mean, it's really important to like take care of yourself and take the time to take care of yourself. Um, I'm also wondering like if there are any ways that you can see these like forms of love being materialized in like actions or like objects, like how you would represent them. I know you mentioned like nails and like face masks, but I'm also wondering like in when you're in connection to people, in relation to people. You also mentioned like gift giving, so like maybe some like examples of like things like that. Yeah.
I would maybe like sometimes it's like your favorite snack or like your favorite drink that like or like a drink that someone really loves, and then like you'll just like go out of your way and just like order it for them without them knowing. Um, like maybe like more like tangible things, like kind of like paying attention to like what people say and kind of like giving that back. Um, like and it like for example, like my best friend from home, like I we both like to crochet, but she took it and ran because she has more time than me. And so like and she knows that I've always loved like crochet things, so she made me like a crochet beret that like she's sending me, or maybe I'll just get it when she goes back, when I go back. Um, or like like I think of this like my mom like my mom knows how obsessed with BTS I am, and like and I got her obsessed with them too. But like me, like pointing out, be like, oh, I love that picture of them, and then her buying me like a pillow with that exact picture on it, like little things like that.
Yeah, yeah. That's really cute. Yeah. um, I'm also wondering, like going back, I realize there are like still a couple of questions that I want to ask you about in terms of like the imagination and fantasy. But is there like, do you imagine like what would be the very first, like what would be the first things that you would want to do action wise in your imagined world, in your imagined form?
I feel like it would maybe vary by like what time period I'm going in. Um, but like I feel like if I was in my universe, I would want to play a role in helping like connect people. Like I think like to an extent people would find each other. Um, but like if anything, just like being that like connector person to like introduce new people, and maybe like I don't know, just bring like a social aspect, and so in a way to like connect people. Um, like I feel like maybe like I would have like a shop full of spells. Um, and I feel like they would be spells that would be like giftable spells, spells that could like create little moments. If that makes sense.
Yeah, that actually goes right into like the other question I had. Like, I feel like you've been emphasizing like the small moments, like bringing joy in that kind of like wonder. And I'm thinking about like how our fantasy and like the way that we approach like imagination can in return like seep into our reality. And so I'm wondering how like imagination, like how you go about your life that like might be like colored by like, these like imaginative qualities.
Mhm. I feel like I would connect imagination into like a manifestation of emotion. Um, like I feel like in a time where like we've become so adaptive, like before, all we used to know how to read was a face and specifically a mouse, like a mouse, not a mouse. And like now I feel like I've learned how to read people's faces like through their eyes, and kind of like imagining all the different ways people react just through their eyes because that's all you can see. Um, and I feel like in a way, like imagination comes to like what do the rest of the people look like? What am I seeing about them? And kind of like really become like that imagination of like who am I getting to know in this world at the moment?
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, I really like how community based and like small joys based that like your what you fantasize about is. Yeah. Yeah, and other than that, like is there like anything about like imagination or fantasy and love that like you haven't been able to like talk about that you want to add?
Um, I don't know. I just know that I would want to like focus like on a certain like aspect of like love. Like I would want my universe to be like a place where it almost feels like love is a tangible thing and like it's like for like themselves, like by surrounding themselves by things that like they love, but also a place where like you could feel like that magical connection with somebody else too, and there's just like that like reassurance that there's like you'll find someone someday. um and I feel like maybe like I'd want to do like I like the idea of like the soulmate tattoos where like you have like an identical marking somewhere on your skin that's like similar, that's like identical to someone else out there, and that's how they find each other. And I feel like that level of like spontaneity but still all coming together is what I would love to see.
Yeah, I love the idea of tangible love. I realized that I was curious earlier, but I forgot to ask you what like tattoo you would want. I guess you said that you would want to be able to change it constantly.
Yeah.
But like if there are any images.
Like I currently, it's they're really faded, but I currently have like lavender. I purposely put in a place that's not visible to the beholder, but like I currently like have like lavender, and like I like the movement, so I feel like I would love like something that created movement across like the forearms. Um, Definitely flowers though. I love flowers. My middle name is a flower. Um,
Yeah, I'm thinking about like once you said like movement, I'm thinking about like those like smoke tattoos. I don't know if you've seen them, but yeah,
yeah.
they're so beautiful. Yeah. Yeah. Okay, well, the last question is if there's like any message, like a final message that you would like to leave for anyone who may be watching.
Um, I feel like if I would want to leave a message, it'd be kind of like surrounded that like one of two things. It's like you are all you need, but that doesn't mean that you can't use yourself and what you have to connect with like other people. Um, so it's like all the strength you have is inside yourself, but you can share that strength with other people, and that's where like the whole thing builds and connects.
I think that's a wonderful message. Yeah. I don't know if you want to like expand upon that more and like how like the imagination can play into like you being what all that you need and being able to connect to other people.
I feel like I would say that people will only see the side of you that you project. And so like as hard as it is sometimes, you have to kind of like display yourself with the full confidence of who you are, because it's like that's the side that you will ever see. And it's like not an easy thing to do, but I feel like coming to terms with like what you have, like what your strengths are, like what your appearance may be, like acknowledging that kind of like nothing that nobody that anyone ever says about you can truly impact who you are inside. And I feel like kind of like coming to terms with like accepting at least to a certain extent what you have and like what you can bring, and acknowledging that these are the things that I can bring to the table. um, I feel like once you kind of like make a form of acceptance with yourself, you realize how much you can kind of like open yourself up to others, um, as well. Um, and like I'm kind of like sometimes I'm very like kind of feminist, like I don't need a man to do anything, but that doesn't mean I don't want to be with somebody. So I feel like that's where like my mentality comes in. It's like I can do everything I need to in life by myself, but that doesn't mean I have to. And that's like kind of like finding a balance in between the two. Of
Perfect. Yeah. If there's nothing that else that you want to add, then like thank you so much for this.
course.
Thank you. Yeah. Perfect.